Lovely. So, good morning, everyone. What a fabulous morning. I am so pleased to be able to welcome my guest. My name's Amantha King. I'm the founder of Amantha King Coaching, and I am so pleased to be able to be in the company of someone I last saw 31 years ago. Please welcome my fabulous friend, Shehnaaz Latif. Shehnaaz, so gorgeous to have you here this morning. We were at school together, right?
Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So I just celebrated my 49th birthday yesterday, and I know we're getting into that fifth decade, our 50th trip around the sun, as I like to speak about it. And yeah, how fabulous. But 31 years have passed. I actually can't believe it.
And thank goodness for social media. Social media gets a bad rap, doesn't it? But actually, it brought us together, and it's so lovely. I feel so blessed. We literally used to sit along the same row at school, didn't we? We went to Watford Girls Grammar. And it's just so wonderful. It's like time hasn't changed at all. And I know many of our friends who will watch this will think, I think they'll have an equal moment, I think. But we got together, we've had a couple of chats offline, and we've done a bit of catching up, although there's still so much more to do. But we both felt we really wanted to come on and talk about an element of relationships, about toxicity. But before we do, Shehnaaz, introduce yourself. Tell us what you're about. What have you been doing with your life, and what's important to you?
Thank you so much, Amantha. Yes, absolutely delighted. And you did reach out to me over LinkedIn, which was brilliant. Now, I've spent 18 years in the UK charity sector. I'm an impact consultant, a trainer in evaluation. So I work with charities around the country to really help them to demonstrate the difference that their work makes. And that's to learn about what goes well as what doesn't go so well, because we really need to be open to that. And I recently became self-employed, so I continue to serve as a freelance consultant within the charity space. And alongside that, and the reason for going into self-employment was to grow my wellness business. And so I run what's called my wellness zone, and it's an opportunity for people who are seeking routes to wellness to meet people who provide wellness solutions, whether that is Reiki or yoga or nutritional therapy, whatever it might be. My role, I feel, is to curate that space of here are the things you can do, and to bring people together to connect. So that's one of the things that I've been wanting to shift my attention to. And my specialist area is essential oils. So I look at how we can pursue natural ways, natural alternative, natural solutions as families, and empower ourselves to take control of our health and well-being, and really help out our wonderful colleagues within the National Health Service. You know, we know that they're doing their best to look after us, but we also have to take responsibility for that. So for the last 5 years, I've been thinking about that. But what it's caused me to do is to think about wellness holistically, and well-being in whichever form it manifests. So it might be financial stress, it might be, as we're going to speak about, toxic relationships. It could be any number of things. It's not just the physical health, let's work out more type thing. So I'm trying to connect the dots there. And so I suppose the theme that runs through all my work is the desire to make a positive difference, whether that's with charities who are trying to make a difference to the people they serve, or whether it's within our family lives. What can we do to collectively and individually make a positive difference? That's what links the work that I do.
Yeah, so fantastic. What a brilliant description. And that is the common link between the two of us. Although I'm a coach, well-being, you cannot coach someone unless you consider their well-being, you know, because there's more to this person that sat in front of you. And so it is so important, and I love that. And you know, the more holistically and more naturally we can heal ourselves and look after ourselves, the better. And again, in line with the work I do with menopausal women, it's so important, because at this time in your life, we both know, Shehnaaz, right, that you know, it gets tricky, it gets really tricky, and what used to work suddenly doesn't work. So having the capacity to engage with someone like yourself is amazing. And I'd really, and we're going to give your links at the end, but I'd encourage people to connect with Shehnaaz on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and on all her feeds, because she really adds value and is very, very generous with her time, has the most amazing guests on, and provides the most most value, really. And so, yeah, I'd really encourage you to connect. So let's get into toxicity now. You know me, I love a bit of science. And I just wanted to say toxicity, it's a word that gets bandied around a lot. And for people listening to this, anything that's toxic to you, it could be a chemical, it could be something outside of you. Something can be beneficial to you. There's a window of therapy, but it's when you go beyond that window of therapy that something becomes toxic. So let's talk about toxic relationships, shall we? And I'm going to give a definition before we kick this conversation off. So toxicity was first coined in 1995 by, I'm reading this, by a lady called Lillian Glass, a Californian-based communications expert. And basically, she defines a toxic relationship as the following. It's where any relationship between people who don't support each other, where there's conflict and one seeks to undermine the other, where there's competition, where there's disrespect and a lack of cohesiveness. So let's get into it, Shehnaaz. How can we spot and how do we know that a relationship is toxic?
Absolutely, thank you. I want to take a sidestep, because the way to think about the relationships piece is to also look a little bit at the parallels in our physical health and well-being. So, you know, we always talk about going through a detox, or I'm going to do fasting for a few days, or whatever it might be. What is that really about? It's that cleansing process that we want to do, because we realize that we've overdone it on some front. So it may be, as you say, that, well, you know, things like chocolate or alcohol or whatever, none of these things are in and of themselves kind of absolute entire threats to well-being. I mean, maybe alcohol is, because it's a poison, actually, chemically speaking. But we know that in moderation, these things are okay, and our body will do what it needs to do. But when you start to get that kind of icky feeling, or actually your stress levels have risen, or you're just feeling a bit more sluggish than normal, or you're not functioning at your full capacity, you know that there's something going on and you need to deal with that, and you go through a detox process or a cleansing process. So for me, when I thought about the relationship side, I was thinking, can we think about the behaviors that we allow ourselves to be around? And when is it actually no more water off a duck's back? Now it's actually eroding and getting to the place where it's not just like a casual drink or that lovely morsel of chocolate. It's actually becoming something that's festering, and that is now, as you say, you know, we're just mistreating one another. In the physical world, we're thinking about the mistreatment of oneself. In the community world, we're thinking about how we treat one another, but also, I guess, how we treat ourselves. So you could end up having a toxic relationship with yourself. You keep going round those loops. And you know, as a coach, if people continue with that self-sabotaging loop, that becomes a toxic relationship with oneself. And then you need to find a way to detox, because otherwise it's hampering your ability to interact, your productivity. Your view of the world is damaged, and everything that's coming your way is causing you to feel victimed, because you've really damaged your own self-esteem and your own self-worth. So the first point I'd like to start with, and I'd like your thoughts on it, is the toxic relationship with yourself before we think about what happens with others. What do you think?
I think that's such a good point. In the coaching work that we do, because we could be in danger of taking this title too literally, thinking about toxicity in relationships, as you say, something that's external. But whenever I coach, we do the mirror piece, which is what's going on inside of you. You know, what things are so deep seated that you may not even be aware of. It could be being bullied at school. It could be one of those early foundational relationships with the mother or father that hasn't been positive. It could be something with your first boss. It could be anything, and it can be incredibly subtle. But what that does is it creates a perception, an image inside of you of what this situation is about, and we just run with the script then around that situation. So you're absolutely right. I mean, I often say to people, the time for you to know that there's a problem is when you feel that icky resistance. Could be procrastinating. It could be those habits that you talk about, Shehnaaz, which is, you know, you constantly go back to to the thing that you think you need. I'll give you an example. Right now, I'm doing intermittent fasting because I put on my lockdown menopausal weight, whatever you want to call it, that spare tire, insulation, all of that. And nothing was helping. But what I notice about myself with intermittent fasting is there's so much habit around the things that we reach for, you know, the things that definitely aren't necessarily helpful to us, but because we've always done it. You know, I always find myself at 10:30 downstairs by the coffee machine, and I'm always opening the top cupboard where the biscuits are. I mean, what's that's about? You know, but I don't need that. With a little bit of self-reflection and sitting down and feeling that uncomfortableness, I've been able to say, okay, that isn't good for me. So let me find something that is better.
Yes.
And you don't always have to find an alternative. Sometimes it's just letting something go. So I think you're right. I think we really must do that internal work. So how do we become more self-aware, Shehnaaz? How do people sit in that uncomfortable and become more aware that actually I'm a big part of that equation and I'm a big part of that situation?
So it's interesting because I think depending on how you've been brought up culturally, philosophically, all of these things, we tend to other the self, and so we kind of go, oh, but you know, that's not really me. And actually we don't connect who we truly are with how we then also come across in the world. So if you continuously are feeling bashed or abused, or and not to belittle when those behaviors are coming your way, to what extent is this then, because we do mirror each other, to what extent is it part of the dynamic that has become unhealthy for whatever reason, and to what extent is it the way that we're perceiving the interaction? So relationships are meant to flow there. It's a dynamic. Context has so much of an effect as well. But I've noticed over the period of time that I've had friends like yourself for many years, and you know, we've had the school friendship, then we've had, or connection, then we've had a break, and then we've connected again. Now, how does that happen? I think if you think about things fundamentally, and you think about who you are fundamentally, you start to reconnect those pieces in the brain. So I'll give you an example. I was always told growing up that I was just too sensitive. Okay, now sensitivity, sensibility, empathy, compassion, all these things are now coveted qualities, right? To be able to have that and to tune in and connect to people. But I was almost asked to shed that as I was growing up, because that was seen as a weakness. And I had, you know, I was born with eczema, for example. So something was going on internally that was attributed to physicality, stop having dairy and, you know, do this and do that, all of which I did. But emotionally, the eczema was not going because I hadn't dealt with what was going on emotionally. And I was being labeled as too sensitive, which I owned. Now cut to, you know, to the mid-20s, where I've just gone, do you know what? I can't not eat dairy because I blooming love chocolate. So I'm going to do it, but I'm going to understand what it does for my body. And I'm also going to know that if I eat chocolate and I'm careful physically with that, if I'm satisfied emotionally, the actual effects of the dairy don't happen. So isn't that interesting? You could prescribe the physical thing, and then you're so stressed about having to dart past that and to take it out of your diet that you're still not getting rid of the eczema in my case, because you're emotionally finding it difficult. So you have to connect the dots, and we've been asked to separate that. We learn in home ec how to make cookies, and then we go and do phys ed, and we get told, you know, we've got to move more. And it's like, can we please connect these dots? Because it makes no sense. Why not give me a power snack in my home economics, in my baking class, so that when I get out there, I'm pepped to go and do my run? Where's the connection? That's what I feel is missing, is that we have to think about our own internal ecosystem and what works for us, and then do that experiment. You are the expert in your life, is my view, really.
I think that's so true. Honestly, I think, it's all about that mind-body connection, isn't it? I mean, I talk endlessly about that with my clients, because you can suggest any number of logical things for someone to do, but unless it really goes to the core of you, which is your head, your heart, your gut lining up. Did you know, by the way, this is a fact that will just shake the room a little bit. When we are conceived, do you know the first tissue to form inside the developing fetus is your gut tissue? We're a tube before we're a brain. So if anyone is in any doubt about how powerful our gut is in terms of instinct, and so the toxicity around, the food that stimulates the emotional response, it's there. And so that's why whenever we must look at ourselves, we must look at, okay, what provokes the reaction? Is it a food substance? Is it a person? Can it be a combination of those things? Because we do know the brain stores this incredible memory, the capacity to hold memory in your gut. This is what keeps us safe ultimately. This is dangerous, or this is not good for you, therefore do not do it. That's why many people, did you know that most gastroenterologists think that IBS is a condition of the mind?
Yes. Wow.
Because it's just the gut reacting to something, and more often than not it's something that's inside, an emotional response in our head. And so I get that too, Shehnaaz, and like you say, that powerful experience of having eczema, and then it's almost like that placebo thing, isn't it, that actually, well, you can have chocolate. But what I took from what you just said there is about responsibility. It's about taking that responsibility that, yeah, if you're going to have chocolate, be prepared. How your body's going to react to it. But actually, for me, I really engage with the whole awareness piece, because I think that is really the starting point for most people, sitting in that uncomfortableness of everything good and bad in my life. In some way, shape or form, I've either invited it, encouraged it, or colluded with it. And it's can sometimes, and I know that can be quite a leap for people, but in some way, shape or form, our personality, the physicality, the mentality of us has attracted that situation. Just for the record, I was always told, and still do get told, by the way, that I'm too sensitive.
Wow.
And maybe that's the connecting thing for us. The sensitivity is the thing that I value most in my work. It's the thing I value. My friends tell me they value most my intuition and that sensitivity that I can offer. And I'm absolutely sure your friends would say the same about you, Shehnaaz. So it's ironic, isn't it? If we're labelled in that way, how we can make that work for us. So let's talk about this. So what next? So let's say you do understand that these things that are toxic for you. Let's pick a couple of categories, shall we? And I'll let you do that. How do we deal with those categories?
Yes. So I'm going to pick the category of the relationships that we then hold. So we talked a little bit about the relationship with yourself. You've got yourself for life, so you've got to work on that. Not
just for Christmas.
So it is about being embracing of those strengths, and I know you do a lot around strengths coaching as well. Know what they are, own them. They are your gifts. I think what I would add to something you've just said is that if you're born with certain things, like I was with eczema and sensitivity, then some of that is generational, genetic, the ancestral memory, whatever you've been sent here to break the patterns off, or otherwise you will just perpetuate it. You've got that as a thing to do. But the category that I'd also pick is the one about relationships with the external environment, with your families, with your friends, with your communities. And again, it's a dynamic, it's a dance between your perceptions of what reality are and theirs. And there's no actual objective reality. It is as we perceive it to be. So I've started to really listen to the language I use to label how I behave, how I speak about my children. I label what they do rather than how, I don't label them, I label the behavior. And that's a Brene Brown thing. That's a parenting 101 thing. That was naughty rather than you are naughty, because those labels, even when positive, are problematic. So now when people say things to me, and I do still struggle because I feel like it should be water off a duck's back, I go to the place where I say, what are my strengths? And I'm walking around now with my given name, but also my strength name. Lovely. And I think one of the things I'm told when I do the tests is that connectedness is a strength, that responsibility is a strength, that individualization is a strength. So then I walk around with that and I feel, where is the place that I can connect here, rather than looking for a disruptor? And now I have to pull away from this individual. Now it's really difficult because you want to say that individual presses my buttons, that individual says hurtful things. And when you're growing your children, that's exactly what they come back and say. So-and-so did this to me, so-and-so was mean. What do we say to them to say, what is it that they did? Let's talk about the thing they did. How did it make you feel? Now, what can you do with that? So bring it into your internal ecosystem, but then remember who you are as a strong character and try and find how to respond to that. Take the count to 5 so that you're responding rather than to react. And I think for me, then it's about perception and how you interact with other people that is the choice that you have. For sure, you have control over those choices. So nobody is being mean to you. You are witnessing behavior that is difficult for you. For what reason? What is it doing internally? You get to do the internal check and then respond accordingly.
Yeah, that's so powerful, definitely. And I really like that. In NLP, we talk about reframing. And it is very easy, and particularly with children, they absorb and almost integrate, when in fact actually what we want to do is we just want to keep it at an awareness level, which is okay. Like you say, Shehnaaz, we're noticing something makes us feel uncomfortable. That's what we're actually noticing. So you're right, we're not having this thing done to us. But I mean, I've got a teenage daughter, and you can imagine the sorts of conversations, because everything is in flux, their hormones, their growth spurts, dopamine is off the chart, so the risk taking. And so we definitely have conversations which sort of pull out rather than that absorbing take place, pulling back out, put it on the table so we can all see it and we reframe it. So we say, okay, someone's been unkind. Okay, what do you think is going on for that person? And you will get resistance back, which is, no, I feel wronged. No, it's like, no, let's just put it on the table and observe it, notice it. Let's look at it from a different viewpoint. And it does take time as a parent. You're absolutely right. But actually, that is our responsibility, isn't it? To help these people become young adults. And these young adults go on to be thriving, functioning, brilliant, purpose-led adults. So it is so important, and we're not dismissive. And I love what you said there about, it's about, we describe the behavior, not the individual. And I know for some people that's a bit too rose-tinted spectacles, but trust me, with the elevated levels of mental health, we absolutely do need to get that right. And it's not, dishing out compliments for the sake. Make them authentic, make them genuine, but make them about the behavior, because that reinforces the behavior. Because actually, over positivity can be almost as toxic as being negative. We can put too much of a burden on perfectionism, being a good girl, being a good boy, being a strong man, all of those sorts of things. So it is so important, as you say. So Shehnaaz, if you were to summarize them for people who are maybe watching this and thinking, okay, right, so what I'm hearing is it could be about me as much as about anything else in my environment, other people, family. What would be a good crib sheet in terms of steps for people to follow if they think, yeah, I recognise there is toxicity in my life?
Absolutely. Good. Really good way to kind of give ourselves a bit of a roadmap, although the roadmap is never the territory, to borrow a phrase.
Yes.
But again, I'll borrow a phrase here. When I was on a parenting program a couple of years back, one of the things our facilitator spoke about was that misbehavior is unmet need, is a sign of unmet need. So when somebody behaves in a way that strikes you as abusive or shameful or you know, mean, nasty, whatever it is an unmet need in them. Now, what does it then mean to you is down to what it is that you have done for your own, you know, the work that you've done to be able to behold these emotions that are coming your way. So I would always say, as my number one tip, to actually welcome those emotions. And whether that's, you know, feelings of shame or of guilt or of fear or of anger, of joy, of happiness, all of these emotions are there as messages for us to then process. And that would be the second tip. After welcoming those emotions, give yourself time to process. And it is as simple as, you've talked about the anchoring technique in the past as well. If you see a smiling, if you see a squirrel running in the trees and that makes you smile, and you quickly connect your fingers, each time you experience something that makes you feel less than happy or tumultuous, do that little thing, and then it will bring you back, anchor you back to the smiling squirrel, and you'll think, okay, I've got time to process now, let me process. Say a little less, think a little bit more, reflect, and then find a way to respond. But the third thing, and I think the final thing for me, is that we feel, don't we, as we get to this stage of our lives, quite a bit of guilt for things that have passed. Now, I talk about Brené Brown a lot. I think she talks about guilt as something where you've intended to do harm. I don't know that many of us intend to do harm, but if you are carrying around feelings of guilt, what is it that you can do and think about and process in your own way, slowly or with help, like with somebody like yourself or a therapist of some description, where you can really think about why that circumstance occurred, why that situation occurred, why those reactions happened the way they did. Only you know what that drama story looks like, okay, and why that's happened. So if we're trying to go and correct some of the things that we've done in the past, or some of the situations we've allowed ourselves to be in, it is about getting support, I think, so that you can talk it out, really understand what went on there, and then going forward, you know, to learn the lessons. And then you may well think that it's worth going back to those individuals or that circumstance and really try to readdress it in a way that befits the person that you want to be going forward. So we can expel the toxicity. We can, as we do, coming back full circle to the top of our discussion, we can detox, we can cleanse, we can change what chemicals we put on and what we ingest and how we process the world. It's not the end. You know, you absolutely, every day that you've got breath, you've got another opportunity to do things differently. And that's what I would say. There is hope. As long as you've got a plan to go with that hope, you can make a change for sure.
Fabulous, wise words indeed. So if I bring this round to a summary then, so what we've learned in today's discussion is that toxicity appears to us in many forms, and actually one of the most potent sources of toxicity can actually be ourselves, in terms of how we're processing the past, how we're maybe not resolving situations, and maybe some of those habits that we're running. Shehnaaz, you've given some fantastic tips, and the three that you gave were about, number one, welcoming the emotions, number two, about processing those emotions. You know, I liked that, say less, think more, and yeah, anchoring is a fantastic skill. And thirdly, if you have feelings of guilt, what can you do? And again, what I really, really like is you're not done till you're done, okay? Mm-hmm. And so for as long as there is a breath in you, you can do something about it. And timeline therapy, actually, which is something that I've qualified in, is amazing for getting rid of unwanted emotions. Very simply, what we do is we go back to the past, we don't absorb ourselves in it, but we sort of look down on it and take all the learnings that are helpful to us, because even in difficult toxic relationships, there is something useful to glean from that. We take the learning and we move on and keep moving. So Shehnaaz, oh my goodness, time has flown by. Tell people how they can be in touch with you. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, I have got a link tree that I will put in for you, which has ways to connect with me. I love being visual on Instagram. I love to have people interact with my LinkedIn posts. And I do have my website, which is mywellnesszone.org, where people can find out more about the events that I run, which is including a summit all about money next Tuesday, because money is such a big source of stress. And I have got a really terrible money story to deal with. So I'm doing a global conversation around money and relearning the relationship with that, because it has had a difficult impact on my life, and I know on many of our lives. So I will happily connect with anyone in any of those ways. And I really, really am so thrilled that we found each other again and that we get to have these conversations.
Definitely, definitely, Shehnaaz. This is the first of many. I can feel it. And you're absolutely right. Do you know, financially, Circle did a report at the beginning of lockdown. Financial stress is the biggest contributor to mental health issues. We worry about money because we are conditioned for it to be the most important thing, when in fact it isn't. So honestly, I will be tuning into that. Thank you so much, Shehnaaz, for your time today. I know you're a busy lady. Shehnaaz has got other things to go and do. So from me to you, thank you so much. And I feel blessed to be connected back with you. And yeah, we're going to post this on YouTube and LinkedIn. And so please connect with Shehnaaz. She's amazing. So bye for now, Shehnaaz.